welcome back.
Hello, welcome back to Nintendo Nostalgia. My name is Chris Warren, and I'm really thrilled to be your host today. Also joining me for this episode, we have my good friend, Warren. So, Warren,
Hey, Chris. How are
Hey.
you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. This is awesome. I'm so glad that you were able to join me for this episode in particular. You and I have been talking, back and forth about how much we love this game and this series, and we wanted to make sure that we did this game justice with this type of an episode. So you are the perfect person to be on, and thanks for joining. So, Warren, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay. My name's Warren Akers again, and Chris and I share my first name and his last name.
Mhm.
I what do I tell? What do I tell? I'm a video game fan for a long time, and honestly, I'm more than happy to be talking about this game because I don't get that chance very often.
Same, yeah. It's weird because it's not really a franchise that is super known and I guess popular within the Nintendo community. It's kind of like this series that a lot of people know about, especially because of Smash Brothers and stuff, but
Sure.
there's not too many opportunities for people to play these games. And it's a shame because the game that we'll be speaking about today, and that's Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, is a fantastic game, at least in my opinion. So we hope that we kind of shed some light on this title. Um, also, Warren is like our Metal Gear Solid expert. You're gonna find out very shortly. He knows this series inside and out, and so that's exactly why I'm so glad he'll be joining us tonight. So, in case we have any new listeners, we usually start out our episode with what we're radical rexing about or what we're excited about in life. But if you wanted to skip ahead to the topic at hand, that's perfectly okay. We're going to leave some timestamps for you in the description. So, without further ado, why don't we get into what we are radical rexing about? All right, Warren. So since you are our guests, or my guest, since it's just me, why don't you tell us what you've been excited about in your life?
Well, if you don't mind, personally, I'm going to call this Metal Gear Rexing.
Oh, yes, that was my bad. We were supposed to change that. Yeah. So yeah, we're Metal Gear Rexing today.
Okay, honestly, right now, I'm most excited, and this isn't relevant to our show one bit, but I'm most excited about Metroid Dread.
Yes, same, totally.
I this Just last night I started replaying Metroid Zero Mission,
Nice.
and I guess I'm gonna work my way through the series to get back, caught up. But I'm a fan of that series as well, and it's awesome to see it getting recognition. Now, people are commenting and looking forward to this game that have never played the Metroid series
Yep.
at all. So that's what I'm most excited about. And let me grab this. I've got these. I know no one can see this because we don't have a video, but I've got these Nintendo Hanafuda cards.
Very cool.
So back in the day, Nintendo, when they first started, they were a playing card company, and they put out these were used for illegal gambling
Oh wow.
back in the day, but they still issue these, and they've got Kirby and Wario themed cards.
Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, so I've been learning to play that, but it's all in Japanese and it's kind of confusing. So
Right. Yeah, I saw some Mario ones, and they did have like traditional ones as well. I didn't know they had like Kirby themed and other ones. That's awesome.
yeah.
I think they're even available on Amazon, surprisingly.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
is that where you got
Pick
them?
these up online. Actually, these are my friends. They're not mine personally. I've just been getting into them.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's fun just look, even if you don't know what you're doing, just looking through the cards. They're all unique.
Yeah.
And it's not like a standard deck of cards. It's its own thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's not something you can really just jump into. You kind of have to learn the rules from what I understand. I haven't played it myself, but it's pretty exciting. Cool. Anything else that you've been playing or doing lately that you've been excited about?
Um, this game that we're going to talk about has consumed most of my time
Yeah,
for the last little
totally.
bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Whenever we have this segment, I have to talk about other things that I've been doing, but most of the time it's like, oh, I've just been playing the game that we'll be talking about. But that's especially the case with this game. Yeah, we actually were supposed to do this episode about 2 weeks ago, but we both agreed. You were very accommodating, so thank you again for that. That we wanted to spend a little bit more time with this game because it's not a game that you can really just jump into, kind of like the Hanafuda cards. This is something that you have to really commit to and kind of explore on your own at your own pace to really understand what makes the game special. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. So as for me, my class is over. I know I've been complaining about that class for a while, so I'm really glad that's over. And of course, with my luck, I have signed up for another class, but it's one that I'll be doing like at my own pace, so I can do it at like 3 a.m. if I wanted to. So that's a nice little thing that I can do to stay productive during the summer. I've been getting ready to move out. I'll be doing that within the next few months, so kind of nervous but excited for that. And games wise, I've had a lot of games delivered lately. I've made like these pre-orders over several weeks and months, and it just so happens that a lot of them have been coming in lately. So one that I got today was Unruly Heroes, and I've had a bunch of other weird indie ones. I'll probably bring those up in the Facebook chat uh, group, so you can look forward to that. But unexpectedly, I started playing my Game Boy Advance lately. Um,
Oh,
yeah, I had it was totally unplanned, but it was like a really beautiful day the other day, so I was like, all right, let me put the TV in the backyard and play something outside. And I just wasn't in the. Oh, I was trying to play this game actually. I was gonna start playing the Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, but like since it was so bright out, I couldn't see the game.
oh
Um,
yeah.
so I
It
was
is a
like,
dark
let me
game.
choose it. Yeah, so, because I wanted to, spend some time with this game, but I couldn't do that with how bright it was, obviously. So I was like, let me choose like a bright game that I'll be able to see on the TV, and I kind of attached my Game Boy player to my
Oh yeah,
GameCube.
sure.
Yeah, and so I was playing Advance Wars and Ninja 5.0, or the copy that I have is the European one because it was much cheaper, and they call it Ninja Cop there, which is a much more fun title. Have you ever heard of that game?
Yeah, I've never played it, but yeah, I've definitely heard of it. I didn't realize they call it Ninja Cop.
Yeah,
That's great.
same. I know. I was looking on eBay because I'm like, yo, this game is getting really up there in price. Let me jump on this now while I can. And yeah, the European version is called Ninja Cop, and I'm like, that's so much better than Ninja 5.0. It's just such a stupid name, but what a great, awesome Game Boy Advance game. Oh, I don't have enough good things to say about it. I'll probably make an episode on it in the future.
Do it.
But yeah, oh, it's so good. And actually made by Konami, who also made the game that
Oh,
we'll be talking about today.
yeah.
And have you played Advance Wars?
No, I saw the announcement of the remake. So it's like a is it a tactical strategy type
Yeah,
game? Okay. Yeah, no, I haven't played it, but the remake looked interesting. How
yeah.
closely did the aesthetic, the visuals, the gameplay of that trailer of the remake match the original?
It's weird because it's kind of true to the original if they were to make it in 3D, but also I feel like they kind of added this toy aesthetic to it as well, which makes sense because like just having it look, realistic and cartoony would look a little bizarre. So I like this kind of toyish look to give it a little more personality that they're doing with it. But after playing it on the Game Boy Advance and on my TV, I have to say I kind of prefer the original's look. There's just something about those sprites that are so timeless and really hold up today. So
Gotcha.
I think it's going to be, when the game comes out, like apples and oranges. Some people might prefer the new look, some people might prefer the old look, but there's nothing wrong with either one. So, but yeah, I highly recommend Advanced Wars to anyone who hasn't played it. If you want to wait for the reboot, I'm sure that's going to be perfectly serviceable and true to the original. I hope at least. But if you're impatient, it's also available on the Wii U Virtual Console, and it's one of the best strategy games ever made, and it's very easy to understand, but there's so much depth to it. It's very rewarding and challenging and stimulating, and it's a blast, really. And I don't even like strategy games, so yeah. That's pretty much it for me. Cool. So I guess we'll jump into our social media comments. So we have two Facebook comments, I believe, and also an email from one of our listeners. So we have two comments. One of them is just saying that, and this is from Jeffrey C. Jeffrey said that he sent an email, so I'll just be reading that in a little bit. But Jeremiah also commented. He said that it was a long time ago, but man, it was an upgrade. And again, this is on the topic of Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, which is a remake of the original PlayStation game, Metal Gear Solid. So yeah, he said that this was a big upgrade to that original game. I wished it was on Switch with Pro Controller support. I think having to use a GameCube controller on it was my main gripe. That's fair. What do you think about that, Warren?
Yeah, well, we'll get into this later, but it could definitely use some updated controls, and I would love to see it brought, to the Switch or to some, any kind of modern day setting with updated controls and better inputs.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would say that's one of my main gripes with the game, but it's really not a big deal. It's just like, a little cumbersome,
It
but we'll
takes some
get.
getting used to at first.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I started the game, I was kind of frustrated because I'm like, oh, is the whole game going to be like this? But you really start to like learn the controls and start to overcome it and kind of find ways to trigger things when you want them to be triggered, etc. But yeah, we'll definitely be getting into that. Okay, and the email that Jeffrey sent us reads as follows. So, wow, Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes. So I was and am a huge fan of the Metal Gear Solid franchise. I even love Metal Gear for the NES. Metal Gear Solid 2 is still my favorite video game. However, Twin Snakes is particularly special, and it's how I got my brother into the series. We then played 2 together, and these great experiences definitely made him a fan. I didn't necessarily expect anything more than the original with better graphics, but it feels so much better to play than Metal Gear Solid. This is still my go-to as far as what I want in a ground-up remake. However, the best part was seeing his reactions to the game and experience, which was so much fun to see. Now I've done the same this year with Mario 3D All-Stars, seeing how much my girlfriend enjoys those games and seeing her playing them for the first time. Nothing beats that, even experiencing these games for the first time myself. So I rambled way longer than I planned, and I hope that this made sense. Whether any of this winds up being read, it is. I'll obviously be looking forward to the episode and hearing your memories on this wonderful and personally beloved game. Take care. Well, thank you
Nice.
very much for that, Jeffrey. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that, Warren?
Listen, Jeffrey, that I agree with you. One of my favorite things to do just in general is to see someone's reaction to something that I enjoy. And honestly, even if they don't end up liking it, it's just watching someone discover something for the first time that I love. It's fascinating. And so good on you for, for doing that with your brother and your girlfriend, with the Mario series also. So I think that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. It really highlights this one aspect of gaming that's the social part where it's not just that you're playing something together like co-op or competitive or something like that, but really experiencing the same game together and just really witnessing each other's reactions and experiences as things unfold. There's just something really special about that, and we. I don't want to say we lose that through like online play these days, but there is something about it that there's some kind of disconnect in that way. But yeah, it is something that's truly special about video games, like just really spending time with someone playing something.
And to add to that, games particularly like this, like the Twin Snakes, where there's so much story and narrative, it really is, it's like a journey that you go on.
Yes,
And to find someone else and to be able to relate to them and say, how did you take in this journey? To be able to have those, it's almost like like a shared experience. Like you
absolutely.
both went on some sort of adventure or journey together to be able to break that down. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. Yep. I could not have said it any better myself. Yep. It's like this shared memory that you have with someone else, and you went on that journey together, and it's just this unique bond that you have with someone else. So it's very special, and I think that um, it's not something that's so widely recognized by the general public. I don't think. I think they
Hmm.
just sometimes see video games as being this like mindless thing, but really it's examples like this that are that really separate it from other mediums. Not really separate it, but add to other mediums too, like TV and movies. Video games, when we share them with other people, they really bring a special memory along. So cool. Thank you very much for sharing that email. That
Yeah,
was
thank you,
really nice
Jeffrey.
to read. Yeah. All right. Well, that is all of our social media comments and emails. So thank you guys again for submitting those. So why don't we get into our topic today, which is, again, Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes for the Nintendo GameCube. All right, so let's do this. But before we do get started, I just want to give two quick warnings. So this is a game that is rated M for mature. So I don't want younger listeners to be listening to this. So it is possible that we don't really discuss anything too adult themed, but just wanted to give that disclaimer just in case. And also, we will probably be talking about some spoilers to the story. We'll try to give a heads up about that, and you can find where to skip ahead to in the episode's description if you're new to this game or haven't experienced it yet. We'll try to be respectful of that and give you a heads up in case we talk about anything too spoilery. So, two quick heads up about that. So why don't we talk about the background of this game and some little details about it when it was released. So, Warren, can you get us started with that?
Sure, absolutely. So this game initially released, I guess, only released
Yeah.
in 2004 for the Nintendo GameCube, as Chris said. And they wanted to, bring some modern sensibilities at the time because Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, I think, that came out just before, and so they ended up bringing over some of those same gameplay elements to this remake and bringing that up to date. Because really, if you compare the two, compare this to the original Metal Gear Solid, it looks vastly different. The gameplay is similar, but they did again bring over some similar elements.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize this though. I looked it up after playing this game for the past week and a half. It's when you it's hard when you've played both this and the original not to compare them.
Right.
But a lot of the cutscenes in this are drastically changed. And so this is what I looked up. I found they brought in a Japanese film director to direct the cutscenes of this game, and it does have that kind of flair of like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or even The Matrix, like bullet time. a lot of like slow motion dodges, that kind of thing that weren't present in
Right.
the original. But so the story goes that Shigeru Miyamoto uh, approached Dennis Dyack, who worked with Silicon Knights, um, and in some cafeteria somewhere, I don't know where they were, but came up to him and said, "Hey, we want you to bring Metal Gear Solid to the Nintendo GameCube," just kind of out of the blue.
Wow.
And if you make your way all the way through the game, you'll see Shigeru Miyamoto's name just as a special mention at the end of the game. But um, yeah, there was a lot of attention given to maintain the integrity of that original game, bringing it forward to the GameCube, but also updating it. They re-recorded the dialogue to make it more closely match the original Japanese, so that the story was more consistent, and it gives it a through line tying it in. I think personally tying it a little bit better to the series overall.
Oh wow, interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, so Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes is a remake of an original PlayStation game. That original game came out in 1998, and as Warren mentioned, this game came out in 2004. It's March 9th. It's an action adventure stealth game, and Hideo Kojima, I don't believe, was the director of this game, but he was still all over it. I think he was like the producer, and he had a few other roles in this game, and so his footprint is definitely seen in this game. Um, and it was a collaboration between Silicon Knights, also as Warren mentioned, and Konami, which owns the rights to Metal Gear Solid and that franchise and all the other sequels, etc. So so Warren, can you give our listeners like a little bit of some background about Hideo Kojima, because he's a name that a lot of people have been mentioning over the past few years, but it's possible that they don't really understand what the hype is about with him.
Okay, so Hideo Kojima, honestly, the name today is almost a meme of the person.
Yeah.
But so he began with Konami back in the 80s, I guess. Is if you go back and play his first few games, they're nothing similar to what we see in Metal Gear Solid. And his most recent game, which actually is getting an update, Death Stranding. But he's been with Konami all along up until the final game he made for them, Metal Gear Solid 5. There was a lot of drama surrounding that, but he himself has talked about his love of film, his love of movies and cinema, and you can very, very clearly see that, uh, you know, and all of that and what that means in Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes. It's very, very evident.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yes, Kojima has produced, directed, and written tons of games over the last, goodness, 40 years, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's something very special about everything that he produces or creates, because he adds, in my opinion, a very unique flair and level of detail to his games that many other games don't even come close to.
Hmm.
And you'll definitely see why that may be, or how that may be, especially in this particular game. So a lot of his games, unfortunately, haven't really made it to Nintendo consoles nearly as much as something, say, say PlayStation. But anytime that it does, it's an event, because he's just such a visionary and a pioneer within this field. So I have a lot of respect for the man. Before we move on, I just wanted to mention a couple quick little tidbits about the game. So this is a game that was exclusive to the GameCube, which was a really big deal, at
Hmm.
least in my opinion at the time, because this was a time when it was pretty clear that the GameCube wasn't going to be this massive hit. So for us to have a game like this was a very big deal. And it came on 2 discs, and not too many games at that time, especially, came on 2 discs. So it's not like one of them was for like bonus features or anything like that. The whole game spans across 2 discs, and it's not the longest game, but like there's a lot of detail in this game, so it does make sense. The cinematics, especially, my gosh. But the differences between this game and the original, Warren definitely touched on this, but they added a person mode, which was originally on the whatever it was, Metal Gear Solid 2, which I unfortunately haven't played. And like Warren said, one of the main attractions was the redone cutscenes. Some people like them, some people don't. For me, at least, I thought they were very good because I never played the original, so I don't really have anything to compare it to. So, as a 14-year-old, I was just like, yeah, this is fun. This is actiony. Why not? But I
What
can
I've
see,
found,
yeah.
what I've found is that people that start with this one before playing the original like this one more, and people that start with the original like that one more. It's really just, as it is where your nostalgia or where your history lies. But I can definitely say, going back to the original, it feels very stiff by comparison.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Um, yeah, the graphics are a little bit better, and something that I thought was really interesting is that, and maybe you read up on this, Warren, but apparently the voices were redone not just to make them like better, and also I didn't know what you said before about them having it like kind of tie into things a little bit better, but apparently the original audio on the PlayStation, when they recorded those, it picked up a lot of background noise,
Oh
and
yeah.
when that like when they tried transferring that to the GameCube, I guess like the sound chip in the GameCube was like, the background noise became pretty clear. So they're like, okay, let's just start this over, and I guess they had like a new vision, like you said. So I just thought that was like an interesting little tidbit. Something that I would like to stress though is that this game in particular, more than almost any other GameCube game that I'm aware of, is starting to experience something that is called disc rot. And disc rot is something that is heartbreaking to me, especially as a collector. But for some reason, a lot of people are reporting that disc rot, where the disc literally starts to rot over time, is especially happening with this title. They think it's some type of like manufacturing defect or something like that. So my recommendation, before I forget, as this episode continues, is that if this is a game that interests you, get it now and play it now while you still can, because this is not a game that is available anywhere else. It is a very special game, in my opinion. And yeah, if this might be the only way that we'll be able to experience this game. So just wanted to throw that out there.
That's really sad and unfortunate. I didn't realize that, and that brings up a greater issue for the entire gaming industry of video game preservation.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate that this game is bound to the GameCube. That is the only place you can play it. I would love to see this among many many other games that are stuck on consoles, or that have become so rare now that if you're going to buy them on eBay or in the used market or somewhere, Amazon, then prices are just through the roof.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I have no idea how much this particular game goes for at the moment. Hopefully, it's something that's still pretty affordable, but it really sucks to shed some light on the reality that games are not really forever, especially those on discs. So it sucks, but you know what? I'm glad that I've played this game. I have beat it, and the memories that I have of this game are gonna transcend time, even long after these discs rot. But just wanted to bring that up. It's something that I've noticed a lot more lately, and there's really nothing you can do about disc rot. You just kind of have to play your games while you still have them, and as soon as you can, and just really cherish the time that you have with them. So sorry for that if it was a downer, but I just think it's something that's pretty important. So I first want to talk about, now that we've given some background details, about our nostalgia for this game. So Warren, why don't you start us off? What comes to mind when you think of this game?
Okay, so for this, I've actually got to go back to 1998. So I never played the original Metal Gear Solid back in the day. And I didn't. This was before the GameCube came out. This would have been around, the time of the N64. I had a friend who had a PlayStation, and I personally, we with my family, we had what was it called? There were like reading rewards or something at Pizza Hut. I don't know what it was called exactly,
Oh
but you could read a
yeah.
book and get like a star, or I
Yeah.
um so through that, somehow I managed to get a PlayStation 1 demo disc from Pizza Hut.
Wow.
And it had 5 games on it. I looked this up so I could remember it. Let's see. It had Tomb Raider 3, Gran Turismo, Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped, Medieval, and Metal Gear Solid
Not bad.
in 1998. And so I had this in my possession, but no way to play it. So I would go over to a friend's house who had a PS1 and try out these games. And I replayed the Metal Gear Solid demo, which is just it's like the opening of the game where you start out swimming through the water at the
Okay.
beginning, and then the first like hangar area that's outside where the Hind D helicopter is, and
Yeah.
it takes you basically up through the point that you crawl into the building, and then it cuts off. So
Yeah.
I played that same, little tiny mission over and over and over, not knowing exactly what Metal Gear was or what that meant, or just knowing like this is cool. I get to sneak around.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
then in 2015, um, I got it was when Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain came out. Um, I just remembered I saw that in the news and the media and trailers for it. Didn't know exactly what it was, but I remembered that demo disc. And so I ended up getting a collection of all the Metal Gear games and played through all of them in chronological order, not release order, but like timeline. And then right after that, that's when I played the Twin Snakes.
Okay.
So
Wow.
I played through that entire series and then was like, okay, and I've heard that this is good too, whatever it is. And so I looked up the Twin Snakes, got it, and played it. So it's only been like 5 or 6 years since I first played the Twin Snakes.
Oh wow. That's late in the game, but cool. Glad you finally got around to it. That's cool. I'm just so we've spoken about this before, but I'm so jealous of Warren's Metal Gear Solid collection, which I think was on the PlayStation 3. It's like what an amazing package of games that would be amazing on the Switch. Like it would just be perfect. I think Metal Gear Solid would blow up, in popularity if it were to come to the Switch. So
Absolutely.
yeah, gosh, I really hope that happens. Cool. Yeah, it's so for me, Metal Gear Solid was a game that was very new to me at the time. It wasn't really a genre that I really dabbled with. I was big on like 3D platformers and, Mario Party, Mario Kart, stuff like that. So this was my first mature game. I was not 17 yet at the time, so I have no idea how I got this game. My parents definitely didn't buy it for me, so I don't know how that happened. Um, but it was a really big deal when I was reading Nintendo Power. They made a big deal that like this classic PlayStation game made by this interesting guy Hideo Kojima is being remade for the GameCube, and it's going to be exclusive, and with the help of Silicon Knights, which at the time they made a big deal out of Silicon Knights, who was a pretty trendy developer at the time, but then they kind of like lost their luster over time. Um, but yeah, at the time, stealth was very trendy. Splinter Cell was very popular, and similar games like that, like Hitman. So stealth was, like I said, pretty trendy. So it was kind of cool to jump in on that. It was so epic and intense and grand in scale, and I was not used to that as a GameCube owner. So it's very cool to experience something like that. It just kind of felt like a interactive action movie, kind of like a Mission Impossible, and it's so cinematic because you have credits playing while you're playing the game. And I just think that's so cool and not something you really see too often. I did beat the game. For this particular playthrough, I only got like, I don't know, 4 hours in or so. So, but I did beat it and loved it. The ending is incredible. And I just thought it was such a, oh, I don't want to say this word. I'll say cool game instead of the word I was going to say. But it's just a fun ride, and it's very 90s and very 2000s. It's very of its time, and I love that.
Yes.
It's just there's some charm to it in that way. But yeah, I really cherish my time with this game. And one last note, like the 2000s for me was kind of like a dark time. This was,
Mm.
post 9/11. You know, everyone was kind of down because of that. It took a few years for us to kind of get over it. And for me, in a way, the themes that were in this game were kind of therapeutic because of that. So playing this game kind of made me, I don't know, feel connected to what was going on in the world, and just, I don't know, there's just something really cathartic about that. So yeah.
There is an aspect of this game that is very feel good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's got a lot of dark twists and turns, but there's an aspect of this game that is very heartfelt. And honestly, I know you've not played this, but Metal Gear Solid 2, that came out, I think, in 2002, and there are a lot of themes in that game that, I mean, that game was being developed when 9/11 happened.
Mm.
And this wasn't intentional, but there are a lot of things in that game that mirror some things, about 9/11. And keeping that in mind, it was kind of hard to play that game at the time. And so then for the next game in the series to be this remake of the classic PS1 game felt like going back home in a
Yeah.
sense.
Right.
This like warmth of like familiarity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the way that they approach the themes in this game, I think that's a kind of a good segue into our next segment, where we kind of talk about the story and the characters of the game. This game involves some pretty intense themes. Nuclear war is one of them, and it's interesting because they include some real video clips of
Oh
actual
yeah.
nuclear war and nuclear missile facilities, like actual real life ones. And it really makes you feel connected to that theme. And it does feel like you're on this actual mission to save the world. And I know it's just a video game, but it does kind of draw you in because of that. But Warren, since you are kind of the expert on the story of not just this game, but the Metal Gear Solid franchise as a whole, why don't you take it away from here? Because there's a lot to say on the story of this game, and it's one of the best parts of this game.
Sure. So as you mentioned, yeah, this story, and not just this, but the entire series deals with uh, nuclear weapons, and it doesn't, fantasize about them. It's a statement on the dangers of the
Yes.
use of nukes, and not just physically and what it can do to the world, but psychologically having that kind of power, and what that means, to the extent that that the end of this game and many of the games will mention, like, this is how many nuclear weapons are left in the world as of this particular date, and let's make efforts to lower that number, basically. But so this story picks up in 2005, and it's definitely, like you said, it's tied in with real world events. um, it takes place 6 years after the previous game, and a lot of people might not realize this, but there were two games before this: Metal Gear, which was also on the NES, and then Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. So this is 6 years after that. The story is that Foxhound, which was Solid Snake's former unit, a division of the U.S. military, he's retired from that at this point, but some members of Foxhound have gone rogue, and they've taken over a nuclear disposal facility in Alaska, and they've made a claim that if they don't get the body of Big Boss, who was the final enemy for the last games, the 8-bit games, um, they want the body of Big Boss given to them, and if they don't get it, they're going to launch a nuke from this site. And a Metal Gear itself, if you don't know, is basically a walking nuclear tank that can go anywhere and launch a nuke from anywhere. It's not just, so it's not just limited to an isolated site. So Solid Snake is brought out of retirement by his former commander. He's injected with this thing that is told that will keep him safe. They're nanomachines that will allow him to. He's just given this story about, this is a good thing. We're helping you. We're sending you in. So basically, the idea is that Snake goes in and stops these terrorists, quote unquote terrorists, and stops Metal Gear from being, from launching a nuke. And that's the setup for the story when you go in.
Right.
And you're introduced to so many characters in this game. There are the people that are your friendlies that you're contacting on the radio or the codec. Yeah. And you can call them anytime and get advice and suggestions for what to do. Then there are all the quote unquote enemies. Do you want me to just run down some of the characters?
Sure. Yeah. Just be mindful of like spoilers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get to a point where I will say, hey, we're gonna get into some spoilers here, but
okay.
But I'll like keep that separate.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about some of these characters because it's not like these just run-of-the-mill stereotypes or whatever.
No.
This game has some really impressive character development, and they've thought long and hard about who these characters are, what their motives are, what their background is, and stuff like that. So, so why don't we jump into that?
Sure. So obviously we've got Solid Snake, the protagonist of this game. There is his former commander, Roy Campbell, who was actually in the previous game, I believe. There is a science officer or scientist, like a medical officer, Naomi Hunter. You can call Mei Ling, who is basically recording your progress on this mission, which just means saving. You save the game.
Right.
There is your former mentor, Master Miller. He's the guy with sunglasses when you call him, but it's funny that he's wearing sunglasses when you're on a radio call and you can't see the sunglasses anyway.
Right.
In the game, some other people that you can call and talk to are Hal Emmerich, who goes by Otacon in the game, who was a technician for Metal Gear and helped facilitate its progress. There is Meryl, who is said to be Roy Campbell's niece, so your commander's niece. She's in this facility, and part of your mission is to rescue her and keep her safe. And then there's a weapons specialist who you can call, and she's not as crucial to the story, but anytime you've got a weapon or an item equipped, you can call her and she'll give you whatever information you need about it. And the cool thing is a lot of these characters have, like, there's so much detail that you can call them and just talk to them about the history of nuclear weapons or the history of Alaska and what it means to be a musher. And you can talk about what the history of Russia and their involvement in this. And there's just so much unnecessary details, so many unnecessary things that thicken and build the world that you're existing in.
Right. It not just like unnecessary, because I would use that word too, but also I appreciate that level of detail is there too, because it adds so much extra oomph into the game that it becomes very clear very quickly just how much thought they put into something like this. Like, there's so much variety to the dialogue that you have with these characters. After each like scene, each character has a whole bunch of different things that they can say to you, and I found a lot of it informative and interesting and funny and helpful and stuff. So it's unnecessary because it's like, wow, they they put a lot of effort into this, and a lot of it isn't even going to be discovered by most players. But I appreciate that it's there because it just adds so much extra level of detail into this game. So yeah.
Absolutely. So they tell you at the beginning of the game, and even in the menu, you can go through this and go into more detail with the story. I mean, there's a half an hour of cutscenes before the game starts if you want to watch it. They're optional from the menu,
Yeah.
just detailing your mission. But they go over who end up being the bosses, that you encounter throughout the game. They actually give you this list. We've got Vulcan Raven, who is this. I don't know what his background is exactly, but you fight him in a tank in this game.
Yeah. They describe him in the game as a giant and a shaman.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Um,
Yeah, he's like tattoos all over him. He's like
yeah,
shirtless
Tactu, he's
and
got a raven on his head.
yeah, and actually has a physical raven like on his shoulder, kind of like a pirate with a
Yeah,
parrot,
yeah,
But yeah, he's like shirtless, and also you're in Alaska, so this is a guy who you don't want to screw around with.
right. Some of the other members of this team of the terrorists are Revolver Ocelot, who's a big player in the story and in the series overall. You've got Sniper Wolf, and there's a whole, a number of scenes with her as the game progresses in different settings. A lot of people's favorite is Psycho Mantis,
Yeah.
and we'll get into some of what his deal is. But he can read minds and influence people psychologically and control them. There's one that is mentioned but never actually seen. His name is Decoy Octopus.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of a spoilery thing, so I'm not going to talk about that yet. Another character that you encounter in a few different settings is the cyborg ninja,
Yes.
and that's its own side thing that connects to some of the other games as well. And then obviously, just mentioned in name only is Big Boss.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's out of those that we've mentioned so far? Do you have a favorite?
Well, my favorite would be Big Boss, but I don't think he counts because he's not technically in the game.
Right.
Probably Cyborg Ninja.
True.
Um, and I think that's a lot of people's favorite as well. But I love how that ties into both of the last two games because I played those before I played Metal Gear Solid. Playing them in order, I played the 8-bit games first, and that uh, that's a through line story wise.
Right. I
Yeah.
think he probably was like a big reason why they approached the cinematics the way that they did, because he's such an epic actiony character, with his sword, and he's obviously called Cyborg Ninja, and he's exactly what he's named. So he's just like this very epic, very cool character with these really awesome moments in the cutscenes. So yeah,
And
yeah.
you can't see his face. Like he's
Right.
he's got a mask covering him, so you don't know who he is, and it's this enigma, this mystery throughout, the first half of the game. Who is this ninja? What's his deal? Because he's not a part of the terrorists. He's not a part of your group. It's just this rogue element in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the perfect way of describing it. I would say, like, out of the bosses that we've mentioned, from what I remember, Psycho Mantis is my favorite,
Oh
and
my gosh,
there's a
Psycho
reason
Mantis.
why. Yeah, I mean, do you think this would be a good time for us to talk about why he's so special?
Yeah, sure. And if you want, we can launch into some spoiler
Spoilers?
related things. Yeah.
Sure. Unless there was something that you wanted to talk about pre-spoilersy.
No, we can get into it if we
All right.
want to let people know.
Yeah, let's do it. Because the boss fights in this game are so cool, and probably my favorite part of the entire game, because they're just so interesting, and each one is completely different from the other.
Yeah, if you compare this to something like Super Mario Brothers, where the boss it's just the end cap of a certain section. These, and even things like in Metroid or The Legend of Zelda, those characters, those bosses have flair and there's something unique about them, but these have there's a story element, and to the point that you're given an emotional tie to defeating them.
Right.
And it's
Great
not just
point.
like, yay, I beat the boss, but then there's fallout of what does that mean? Like, am I a killer? Do I
Right.
just murder people? What, psychologically, what effect does this have on that person and their life and my life and the people around us?
Yeah, such a good point. Like you said, with Zelda and stuff, it's just a character that kind of pops up. You're given the goal of defeating them, and then life goes on. But there's consequences to your actions in these games, and while they're inevitable, there's still things that are going to unfold as a result of that loss or that action or whatever. So yeah, that's a really good point.
But yeah, Psycho Mantis specifically. So I guess we're just launching into some spoilers now.
Sure.
Um,
So anyone who's listening, will leave a timestamp in the description that you can jump to.
okay. So Psycho Mantis also, he's got this gas mask on. You see him in sort of some flashes here and there up to the, before this point in the game. But when you finally approach him, how do we direct? Do we just talk about exactly what happens?
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay. So everyone loves Psycho Mantis because it's such a unique boss fight, story-wise, but gameplay-wise.
Right.
When you get to this fight, he's in control of a character that you trust at this point, being Meryl, and you're kind of following her around. Um, but he's controlling her, so Meryl starts attacking you, and so you're like, do I shoot Meryl? This is a character I'm supposed to save. How do I stop her? So you've got to figure out a way to disconnect. He's controlling her. Disconnect that control. You end up knocking Meryl out, like tranquilizing her, or just choking her to the point that she passes out. But then the fight with Psycho Mantis is fascinating.
Yep.
Because for the first little bit, you're not able to hit him. Like, none of your attacks do any damage. He dodges you every time you hit. And, you're struggling going, what do I do? How do I fight this guy? How do I beat this guy? And basically, he's reading your inputs because he's a mind reader. He's reading your controller inputs. And the
Like
solution is
literally,
to,
like
yeah.
in the real world, as you're playing the game, that's how it ties into the gameplay. It literally predicts what you're about to do because it can understand what you're inputting into the game.
So you find out he's reading the inputs of controller input 1. And you've got to unplug your controller, physically get up and go to your console and move it to like port number 2, 3, or 4.
Right.
And then he realizes, like, oh no, I can't read you anymore. What's going on? And so you're able to attack him at that point. But it's it's a mind-blowing thing.
For real.
If you don't know that, you're stuck trying to figure out what's going on. Eventually, and you can call some of those people in your collection, and they give you advice on what to do. But I love that at the beginning of the fight, there's this demonstration of his power. And he says, I can read minds, let me prove it.
Right.
And he
Yes.
does this thing, he backs up, and he says, basically what's happening internally is he's reading your memory card. But he'll say something like, so I see you enjoy The Legend of Zelda.
Right.
Or I see you play Super Smash Brothers Melee.
Which is crazy.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
fascinating.
it's one of those things, and that's why I feel like this game is so special, because very few other games, if any really, go to this level of outside the box thinking when it comes to gameplay. For you to literally, like you said, get up and remove the controller and put it in a completely different slot. It's unlike anything I've ever played before. And for them to read the memory card, I don't know any other game, maybe Eternal Darkness. It's very reminiscent of Eternal Darkness and this like psychological
Well, it's the same
screwing with.
developers.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
That's one of the games that he'll read and mention. If you've played Eternal Darkness, he'll bring it up.
Oh wow, I'd never thought of that till now. Cool. I mean, I'm so glad that they had that experience prior to making this game, because it just made the experience, which to me, like, that was my first time being aware. Like, I was completely unaware that that would happen, that I would need to do
Sure.
these things. So that was quite a surprise and really added, like I said, to how special the experience was. I just love games that really push things to the limit and do some things that are so unexpected like that.
One other thing in that fight is as soon as it begins, your TV blacks out
Oh yeah.
right at the beginning of the fight, and up in the top right corner, it looks like what you'd see on like, at the time, like a VCR or DVD player, and it just says like what you would normally see video in the top right corner, just written out there, but it says Hideo
Right.
instead.
Oh, I don't think
It's
I
Hideo
noticed that when I was a
Kojima,
kid.
and so you're
Oh,
like, well, what's going on? My TV changed inputs, for just a second.
right. Yeah. Oh man, that Eternal Darkness connection has my mind like jogging right now. Cool. Yeah, that is why Psycho Mantis is the favorite, because he just has all these interesting tactics. But all the other boss fights are really cool and interesting in their own way. But it was the one boss fight that just does something completely different, not just in this game, but in any other game too.
hmm So short, can we move on to another boss, or are
Yeah.
we okay?
Yeah.
So shortly after that, Meryl's following you still. You save her, um, and unexpectedly, you're walking down this hallway, and she gets shot by a sniper. And so suddenly you're like, oh no, like I was supposed to protect her and save her, but now like, did I fail? Is my mission, compromised? Um, so you've got to backtrack and go find a sniper rifle to take out whoever it is that's that's taken her out from a distance, and you try to take her out. Well, I say her. You find out it's a female, but when you get back, Meryl is gone. You're like, what? What? Not only did she get shot while I was trying to protect her, but I've lost her.
Yeah.
One of my favorite and most memorable parts of the game, when you finally defeat this sniper at the time, you go through the door to the next area, and you're caught by the enemy, and it takes you to a torture scene. Like you're in this interrogation room, strapped to some sort of big console, and there is Revolver Ocelot standing in front of you, and he's like, "We want information from you. We want to know how to launch the nuke. We know that you've got the information, because up to this point you've spoken with some individuals and found out about how to either stop or launch that nuke, and they're trying to figure out how to launch it." And so another one of those meta moments is basically Revolver Ocelot is explaining to you the controls of, how to resist the torture. It's like an electric, you know, shock to you, and you've got to tap the A button repeatedly so that
Oh
your
yeah.
life meter doesn't go out before the time of the shock runs out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's explaining the controls, but then he turns to the camera and points and says, "And don't even think about using auto fire, or I'll know."
I forgot about that. Wow.
um, so basically, another one of those meta things in the game. If you survive that torture, then Meryl lives. But the whole time you're doing it, you have an option to give up and to say, "I
Right.
can't take this anymore." And if you do that, Meryl dies, and it changes the end of the game.
Right.
Of Meryl being alive or dead once you get there.
Am I wrong in saying that, from what I remember, this is where the controller was vibrating like insanely, right?
Yes. Yeah, it vibrates. That's another thing about the Psychomantis fight too. He tells you to put your controller on the ground, and he'll
Oh
move it
yeah.
with his mind.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. Oh man, they did such a great job with that boss fight. Ugh. One of the best ever.
Um, so let's see. Moving on from there, you um basically you after a bit of deliberation, you make your way to the actual Metal Gear hangar. Well, I guess before that, you have to fight Sniper Wolf again. There's this whole big, a lot of drama. There's the quote that Otacon says of, he's in love with this sniper, and he says, "Snake, do you think that love can bloom on the battlefield?"
Mm.
But the game takes time after each boss fight, which I love, to talk about like what does this mean?
Yes.
What does it mean for the world to lose this person that I just took out? What does it mean for my existence? Do I
Yeah.
have a soul? You know, what there's so much there's a lot of psychological and emotional weight and heaviness to each of these bosses you know overcome one at a time.
Yeah. And yeah, that's one of the most beautiful things about this game is that yes, it deals with very serious topics like nuclear war. Yes, it's an action game. Yes, it's a video game, but it has this poetic spin on things that you don't really see too often. And it really adds, I've said this a million times, but it really does make the game that much more special because of it. And they think really long and hard about these relationships and the meaning behind them and what it means for these characters and their relationships together. So yeah.
um so moving on from there, you actually you encounter um Vulcan Raven one more time because you find out you destroyed his tank but not him.
Right.
So there's a boss fight there, and there's some again emotional depth and weight to the end of that. Um, but when you get into the Metal Gear hangar and you finally see Metal Gear for the first time and realize this is it. This is
Yeah.
where I've been trying to go. That's when the game takes this, it takes a pause, a breather to like do something menial. You've got this card key, and you figure out you've got to insert the card key to stop this launch. But it takes three forms. You've got to take it back to a cold area and it changes shape in the cold. You take it back, put it back in, and then you have to take it back to a warm area, like a hot area in the game, and it changes shape in the heat, and then you take it back. And so it's this like you're on the precipice of something, but the game slows down.
Yeah.
And honestly, it gives you a lot of time to reflect on like what have I done? Where have I been? What does all of this mean up to this point? Um,
Yeah, because
and
there's some backtracking involved with that. So you go
yeah,
back
you've
to
actually got
previous
got to
games.
make your way back through the game. They made a shortcut on the GameCube if you can find it. There's this little ledge where there's a hot pipe and a cold pipe, and you can shoot them to lessen that backtracking time. But that changes psychologically what you're experiencing also.
Yeah.
It gamifies what's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like a Zelda-like approach for that particular sequence, but
Yeah.
yeah, it depends on how you approach the backtracking that affects your emotional attachment in a way
Mhm.
to that particular sequence.
So when you finally, I guess this is where the real spoilers drop. When you finally get all of that taken care of, you insert the last key. It initiates the launch of the Metal Gear and the launch of a nuke. And you're like, Wait, what? I thought I was stopping it." And you're the one that starts the countdown for the launch of a nuclear missile. And then it goes into all of these background conversations. You find out that Master Miller, this person that you've known and trusted, and you've been talking to, not only in this game, but he's a character from the previous game as well. And so if you've played that game up to that point, you're still like, oh, I trust this person. They're helping me. They've been advising me the whole time. You find out that he's actually dead, and you've been speaking to Liquid Snake, the antagonist, the main villain that has been hyped up throughout the course of this game. And what he in a dramatic twist, he takes off his sunglasses on the radio call, like you can see that.
Oh
It's like, it's
yeah,
me.
right. And like the graphics on the radio frequencies are not anything special, so for them to do it there was just kind of funny.
Yeah, yeah. It's not even done in a cinematic. It's in that radio call with just two images,
Yeah,
of you and the person you're speaking to. He takes the sunglasses off and like waves his long blonde hair, and he's like, "Look."
right. In like 3 frames.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah,
then
I'll never forget that.
it goes into exposition of what's actually been happening this whole time. So you find out that earlier in the game, you find a couple hostages, and after speaking to them and getting the relevant information, they appear to have died from a heart attack.
Right.
When you approach them, you find out at the end of the game that that injection that you got at the beginning of the game was something called fox dye, and so the government was using you when fox dye comes into contact with members of Foxhound. It simulates a heart attack. So the government was using you to take out the members of Foxhound by coming into contact with them one at a time, and to wipe out Metal Gear, and you find out to wipe out you. You get to the end of the game, you find out basically like you and Liquid Snake, Solid Snake and Liquid Snake are both clones of Big Boss, and the government is embarrassed about that. And they don't like that it's their fault. It was a program from back in the 70s to clone this great soldier and make these like super soldiers, to have this like clone army. We're doing Star Wars here. But you find out that basically they sent in you as a pawn to eliminate everything and to eliminate yourself. Um, and so suddenly you realize that you're alone. You've been betrayed by the government that has been sending you in, that you trusted for a long time, and the person that you're there to save, you don't know if she's alive or not, and the only tie you have to any sense of family is this clone brother of yours who's trying to kill you. And you're left in this point where, like, is there anyone good? Is there anything worth
Right.
fighting for? What are we fighting for? Why are we here? Is there a point to all of this? You're able to, Liquid is controlling Metal Gear. You're able to fight and defeat the actual Metal Gear Rex that we're radical Rexing about. Um, and I love this, and I know you said you didn't make it all the way into this game, but
Well,
the
I did beat it in
yeah,
my
well, yeah,
original.
back in the day, right.
So I do remember that. That's one of my favorite video game moments is when you come into contact and like just being in on that stage and seeing everything just come together and see this like iconic machine that everything that this is what it's all about, and he's right there. It's just like breathtaking in a way, and it's yeah, definitely a moment I'll never forget.
It's I love that they added in first person in this game, because the overhead perspective, what you see when you walk into that hangar for the first time is just metal. Like, you can't really tell what you're looking at.
Yeah.
But the Metal Gear itself takes up the whole room of this hangar, and you can walk around it and take some stairs up and see parts of it. But in this game, you can get back in the corner and look in first person and take in, the awe of this giant mechanical monster that's in front of you, and hope that, like, hopefully this thing doesn't actually, get started.
Yeah.
Hopefully I don't have to fight this thing.
Yeah, because it's so immense, like you said, and it's kind of like a Megazord. If
Yeah,
anyone
yeah,
is
yeah.
familiar with Power Rangers, it's just the immensity of how large it is and what's at scale, or what's at stake rather, because of it. It's this nuclear weapon, so it's intimidating in a way once you're there, even though it's just a video game. Like, you just get this sense of how intense the situation is, and it's like, okay, this is what it's all about, and you're finally at that point. Yeah, and you're right. I am glad that they added first person perspectives to the game, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
So another thing that happens in the middle of that fight is this cyborg ninja that you're not sure of. You don't know if you should trust him or fight him or what. In the last minute, the Metal Gear is about to crush you, and the cyborg ninja jumps in and, like, stops it, holds it up, and basically sacrifices himself, so that you can continue and take this thing out. But you find out that a lot of twists and turns to this. You find out that the cyborg ninja was your former compatriot and fellow Foxhound member back in the day, Gray Fox. who in the first Metal Gear game you go into rescue. In the second Metal Gear game, he's actually fighting for Big Boss, and you have to fight him, and you think that he's dead. And then in this game, that's why you're like, well, that can't be him because he was killed. In the last game, they talk about that throughout the game, but basically he sacrifices himself to give you a fighting chance at the end of the game.
Yeah,
which is also an emotional moment. It's a moment that it puts you in the perspective, like first person. You've got like a missile launcher, and you can take out the Metal Gear in that shot. But if you do, you'll take him out too.
yeah.
And so it's kind of funny. You press the trigger to fire, and Snake says, "I can't do it.
Right.
I just can't."
It's a good impression. Yeah, that's one of the other awesome things about the game is that you have options, and each one has its own unique, advantages and disadvantages, or pros and cons rather. And so, in that particular moment, it's very heavy because it's quite a decision to make. Yeah.
Well, the options that you talk about, that's something that you're given throughout the course of the game.
Yes.
Basically, the whole time you've got this mission, but it's up to you. Do I kill every soldier on the way? Or do I stealth my way through, knock people out, use a tranquilizer gun? Like, are these people in the wrong for just doing their job?
Yes. Yeah.
And it actually, there's a moment towards the end of the game where they're like, you're no hero, you're a killer. And then they show a visual representation of all the people that you've killed up to that point. Like, look at this. You enjoy killing.
Right. I forgot about that. Yeah, totally. That definitely put things in perspective for me because my first run, I killed a lot of people. I was not patient at all. Yeah. So Warren, are you okay with us starting to talk about like gameplay and controls?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So why don't you start us off? What did you think of the controls? And you can take whatever angle you want.
Okay. So honestly, like right at the beginning, it takes some getting used to. It's
Yes.
rough when you're not familiar, and well, at the time, no one was. I mean, Metal Gear Solid was the first one that had a 3D environment, so they were, it's on the cusp of like 3D games. Mario
Yeah.
64 had just come out, a couple years prior. Legend of Zelda came out the same year as the original Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, they're still figuring things out.
Yeah. Sorry, Ocarina of Time is the game I was referencing that came out at that same time. But anyway, yeah, it feels awkward at first because the game is not made to be a Call of Duty, or it's not a shooter. It gives you the option and it gives you weapons, but the game is really set up to be a game where the controls are made so that you can hide.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't make it easy for you to just run and gun.
Mm-hmm.
You
can, but it is
very
difficult. Yeah.
It's difficult, and it's set up to give you the advantage if you are staying in the shadows.
Yeah. Exactly. And you're rewarded for that because that is the intention. Like, yes, there is the option to just kill people and go through. That is very difficult, like we said, but you get more rewards, and it is there's all these extra incentives on playing the game that it's kind of more intentionally designed around. But yeah, with the controls, I think I said this before, but it's very of its time. And so I don't know how newcomers might feel about it because, I did play this game before, so it wasn't my first time playing it. But going back to it after all these years, it did kind of feel like a new experience. And so I was not sure if I would be able to commit to the game because the controls were a little odd. But when you do start to understand how they work, they're fine. It just takes a little bit of adjusting. It's they serve their purpose for the most part. My only issue was that sometimes I would interact with something that I didn't really mean to interact with, or I wouldn't interact with something when I meant to at that point in time. And time is of the essence with a lot of these moments. If you're in the middle of someone trying to come after you, or like if you triggered the security warning or something, you have no time for mistakes or anything, and so it becomes frustrating in that moment when the controls don't do exactly what you intended for them to be. But it's really not that big of a deal. Like, yeah, the controls aren't ideal, but it really wasn't that big of a deal, and I didn't really mind replaying some of these levels when I died. It just became frustrating every once in a while.
Yeah, well, the game doesn't do, a lot of games will give you a tutorial and tell you all the button combinations and exactly how to play it, and the game does not do that.
Yes.
There are a few things it tells you how to crouch. If you call someone and ask them a question, they might tell you a thing, but for the most part, you're just thrown into a situation and you're left to feel helpless. You start out the game with no weapons.
Yeah.
And the only thing you have is like you can punch an enemy or grab them. But you don't even know how to do that. It doesn't even tell you press the A button, to
Yeah.
grab someone.
Yeah.
Um
And I
so
like that though, because it slowly opens up, you know, all these new items that you encounter, and many of them are items you might not even get a chance to get, depending on how you play the game. Sometimes you just won't go into a certain room, and you just won't have access to a certain item for the rest of the game. So it is interesting. It's this interesting mix of, like you said, it there's some abilities that you have right from the get-go that they don't really describe to you and explain too well. So that's open for you to explore and get to know. But also, as you progress, you get these new items. You kind of tinker around with them, see how they kind of fit your gameplay style, and sometimes you get an explanation. Sometimes that gets. Sometimes they don't say anything at all, and that's up to you. And sometimes, like on the radio frequency thing, they'll describe how you use it within a certain scenario, especially after you die a certain amount of times. So,
sure.
yeah, they kind of have a variety of ways of explaining the gameplay to you.
Yeah, at the beginning of the game, you can actually completely miss both the trank pistol and the SOCOM pistol,
Yes.
and which kind of end up being your primary, go-to weapon, either one of those. But you can completely miss it. And just go on into the game not realizing, oh, I should have checked this truck, or I should have crawled under it, or checked this room to pick up that item. Otherwise, you can go on, the game lets you go. You can keep playing it and you can beat the game without having those, but it's really easy to just overlook because you're left so, despite having all these people, you are left on your own.
Yeah, which is cool. It's for a certain type of player. It's not for everyone. It's not for, little kids, obviously, because it's
Oh
rated
no.
M. But it's yeah, if that is something that interests you, you're gonna love this game,
Yeah.
because there's just so much variety, and there's all these different options and ways to approach a certain situation. Sometimes, like I said, the game is designed around a certain way, and they kind of incentivize you to go about that certain approach. But it also is rewarding in its own way to kind of ignore that and do something on your own, and kind of yeah, just get experimental and weird with it.
There's a
Mhm.
lot of, if we can talk about like the actual stealth and the sneaking for a minute.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like that's, you know, Metal Gear is not just sneaking around, but there is a lot of it. But they go out of their way to make that diverse.
Yes.
You'll when I find stealth elements in other games, it's usually not very good or not very fun.
Or
But like,
interesting either.
yeah, yeah. But this game, I mean, you like at the beginning of the game, you start out and Garth, you can see this like field of vision, a cone. And a lot of games will do this on a little map. It shows you where they can see if you've got the difficulty settings adjusted so that you see
Right.
it. But
Right.
um, staying out of that line of sight, you can hug the wall, get up against it. You can press a button to peek around the corner and look at guys, or aim around the corner. You can get on your stomach and crawl. If you're running and run through like a puddle of water, the guards hear it and turn and look and come after you. Um, if a guard spots you, you've still got a few seconds to stop them before they alert the other guards.
Right.
They'll like run to a radio to call for help, but you can stop them before that. I love that when you knock a guard out, when they wake back up, they remember being knocked out and they'll call for help even though you knock them out. If you don't get out of
Yes.
the area, or or actually kill them, then you're still, under, danger of being, alerting the guards. The difference is, like, you can actually shoot them with a tranquilizer and they don't remember being choked or see you. Um, I like that they give you some other things like, I don't know if you knew this, but they brought this over from Metal Gear Solid 2. When you jump over like a ledge, hanging off of a ledge, which you can do,
Yes.
you can press L and R to do a chin up, like a pull up.
What? Oh, I
And
didn't.
if you do that 100 times, it like levels you up and you get stronger.
What?
So if you when you're playing, you can see when you're holding on to something, it shows grip level 1.
Oh
And
my
you can do
God.
100 chin-ups and get to grip level 2, and then do 100 more and get to grip level 3.
So what does it do? It just gives you
It
like better
it, it
health?
means you can hold on longer. So if you're hiding from an enemy and you
Oh,
want to jump over the side of a ledge and wait for them to pass by,
right.
normally it shows this like stamina meter that drains, and you've got basically like, I don't know, 5 seconds that you
Yeah,
can stay there. But you get to grip level 2 and then you've got 10 seconds. And then
right.
you get to grip level 3 and you've got 15 seconds.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. I had no clue. Wow.
So like right at the beginning of the game, you can find a ledge, strengthen, and then go on from there.
Yeah.
Um, there's a bunch of things like that. I love that the game supplies you with chaff grenades. I think
Hmm.
that's how you pronounce it. But they went like you can disable electronic equipment so the cameras don't see you when you go by.
Hmm.
There's the iconic cardboard box that's in every Metal Gear game, which I don't
Right?
know
How
how we
he
haven't mentioned that to this point.
I know, right? And that's how he premiered in Super Smash Brothers with that box.
That's right. But like, so you can put that box on. Obviously, if you're walking around in it, enemies will see you and you'll get spotted. But you can just be a non-discrete cardboard box sitting in the corner of the room, and no one notices you when they pass by, or the
Yeah.
cameras will not see you if you're not moving.
Yeah, it's so clever, and like what you're kind of alluding to is they give you these interesting tools for you to kind of use the world as this playground and sandbox of getting through these obstacles however you kind of prefer. And
Mhm.
the items are just so varied and unique. Like one of my favorite ones, I didn't do it during this playthrough, but I'll never forget when I was a kid and I did this. They give you something called a book that you place down. You place
Yeah.
it down in front of an enemy, or you anticipate that an enemy is going to walk in that direction, and when they find it, they become very interested in this book. And I'm not going to describe what the book is, but
Right.
the soldiers are very interested in the book and what is inside the book, and it is a distraction for the guards for you to do whatever you want to do within that moment. So I just thought
Hmm.
that was a very interesting uh, item that they added, along with all the other ones that you talked about. But that one to me really stood out.
The book, yeah. And it doesn't show what, like, you can throw it on the ground and look and see what it is exactly, but it's just
Actually,
in your inventory and it just says book, you know.
right. But actually, if I remember when I was looking at it through the first person's perspective, the front cover, I believe, is like Alexandria something or other from Eternal Darkness.
Oh,
She's like,
really?
yeah. So I thought that was a cool little nod
Yeah,
to.
there are a few references to other games. I know there's a poster for Eternal Darkness somewhere, like
Yeah.
inside of some of, like when you open up some of the uh like, I don't know, they're like lockers basically. You can open up a locker and get
Yeah.
inside of it and shut the door and hide inside of there. But some of those have posters on the inside of the door, of different things.
Which
I
is cool.
love, yeah, I love that you can approach guards from behind and hold them up, and they'll like stop in place and stand and debilitate them for a few minutes to get, you can get by guards that way.
Right.
Do you remember, speaking of Eternal Darkness and like other games, in the first time that you encounter Cyborg Ninja in that room where you also meet Otacon? If you look around, there's a little Mario and a Yoshi statue.
Yes, I was gonna bring that up. Yep, I thought that was such a cool little addition. I think it's like a bobblehead, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's like figurines, and you can shoot them. You get the one up sound effect, and you get some health if you shoot Mario.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, I think
And
there's Mario and Yoshi. I think that's it though.
There's and on another section of that room, there's a Nintendo GameCube and a Wavebird, like
Sure.
plugged into a TV.
Do you know if they do anything?
The GameCube doesn't do anything. I wish it did. At least I don't think so. You can see on the screen, you can see the like a startup menu. I don't know if it's the
Oh, sure. Like the jingle, maybe, like
I don't know if
the
it's the I don't know if it's the GameCube logo or if it's that like options menu where it shows you like the time and date,
yeah,
like calendar, and you can check your memory card. I think that's on the screen if
right.
I'm
Yeah,
remembering correctly.
something like that. But yeah, it's just all these little levels of detail that they put into this game. Like it's very true to the original, but they also added some interesting extra touches, like the one that we mentioned. But um, I also wanted to mention that the AI, the artificial intelligence of the soldiers, is really impressive, especially for that time.
Sure.
Especially going back to it, because I have played some stealth games ever since, but going back to a 2004 GameCube game, it's just really cool to see that these soldiers communicate with each other. They listen like very intently. So if you are, not just if you're walking but you're kind of moving a little too fast, they will hear your footsteps. So you have to move a little carefully. And they're very thorough. They look under things. If you're near a truck and you hide under the truck, it's very likely that they will look under the truck. They're not these dumb goons. They actually have pretty thorough mechanisms of inspecting an area. So I was very impressed with that. And it makes it interesting because you have to be smart about how you hide. You can't just hide behind a barrel thinking like, oh, they can't see me, because it's out of their perspectives. Sometimes that might be true, but many times, like I said, they're very thorough and they look everywhere.
Well, right at the beginning of the game, you're walking through the snow, and the soldiers will see your footsteps and follow your footsteps all the way to wherever you went.
Yes, so cool. Yeah,
I,
and
I I love too this other detail about those soldiers. If one of them spots you, like I said, you've got a few seconds to knock them out or whatever
yeah,
before they call. But if they get on the radio and they say, I'm calling in a suspicious person, or like, we've got an intruder, if you cut them off mid call, then you can hear the return call that's like, hello, hello, are
right.
you there? And then they send in people anyway. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And it adds this like level of realism to it because in other games it might just like stop the sequence from happening or progressing, but in the real world, it like you said, if that were to happen, they'd be like, oh, something's not right, so let's send in some more
yeah.
people. So
And if
and
you
that
leave a, go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to bring up that like there's different levels of like these security warnings. So when you trigger something, you have a few seconds to kind of hide or do something about it. But if you're not careful, or if they easily find you or whatever, then it's like, okay, this is like panic mode. You have been found. They will shoot you. It is very likely that you will die, although you do have some time to kind of change the scenario and still hide and
Hmm.
have the security level go away. But it really depends on what you do in that moment because you can trigger backup people from arriving or other different scenarios. So it's interesting that there's like this hierarchy of security levels that they thought about.
Yeah.
What were we going to say?
And I was just going to mention that you got to be careful about where you leave somebody. If you leave a body and another soldier spots the body, then they'll come in. Like if they're dead, obviously they'll say we've got a down soldier. But you can knock them out, and they'll come and wake them up, and then they'll actually communicate, be like, "Someone knocked me out," or and
Yes.
and then it still still raises the alarm.
Yeah, I just thought it was so cool that they would be like, you know what, send in replacements because this situation is very fishy. So,
Oh
and
yeah.
then they actually do. I just think that's so cool. But and also one last thing I wanted to note about the stealth element is the use of rumble. I just thought that was so
Hmm.
cleverly implemented when
I
you
was
hide in.
playing with a wavebird, so I didn't see that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, that's my main issue with the Wavebird is the lack of rumble. I hear good things about the Wavebird, but like I'm just I need rumble. It completes the experience for me. But yeah, this game really cleverly utilized rumble. Like when you're hiding in the locker cabinet, you feel your heartbeat because in
Oh,
that moment it's
oh
so
yeah, yeah.
tense, and yeah, and it gets more and more intense if like someone's nearby. And also when you're in like a room and you see that there are guards on your radar walking around the room, you feel the footsteps of them walking by, and it gets
Really?
louder and more intense the closer they are to you. And then as they
Oh, that's
walk away, it
great.
fades. It's very cool. And it kind of reminded me of like HD Rumble, because this was available on a 2001 game system, and that's pretty refined for a technology that just premiered right before that.
Well, like Kojima goes out of his way to break that fourth wall and get you immersed in the gaming experience. And actually, like I forgot to mention this earlier, but you at one point, when you're trying to contact Meryl, um, you don't know her frequency. And so you call your commanding officer, and he's like, I don't know her frequency either. Check the back of the box.
Right. Wait, did they mean the game box? Because I
The
was
game
looking at
box.
that.
If you
Oh,
have that, you can
wow.
look on the back of it, and it says like somewhere on there, it shows like 141 point or whatever the frequency is, and you can
Oh,
tune to that. So like if you don't have the box, you've got to Google it, look it up, and find out what that was.
right. Okay. I was playing that and I saw that today, and I'm like, does he mean the cardboard box that, I have as an item? I wonder, actually, it might be on that. But yeah, I mean, I just keep my GameCube discs in like a binder at the moment,
Oh
so
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have the box available, but I that's cool. I did not know that. I love that.
And
Uh, yeah.
there's so many little elements like that. The what is like little twerks. Goodness, listen to
Oh
me. It's a
Lord, I
mature
hope not.
game. Quirks and tweaks. I combined those words. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm glad you did.
um, like later in the game, after you've been uh, taken hostage or like you've been caught, you're thrown into a cell. Otacon comes and brings you some ketchup in case you're hungry. You can put the ketchup on you and like fake being killed, like fake blood, and get the guard to come in.
Oh,
But when you finally escape from there, you get your equipment and you're just going on with the game like it's nothing. And then you find out like, oh, just in case you pick up your equipment, they put a time bomb in your equipment. And so if you're looking through your inventory, you see bomb and there's like a counter going down.
oh man, I forgot about that.
And so
Yeah.
you've got to pick it up and throw it. And that happens later in the game. Like at one other point, you pick up an item and you don't know what it is and you just keep going, but it's a time bomb.
Ugh, I love that. That's so cool. All right. Well, I think let's move on to our next category, which is the audio, music, and sound design of the game. So, do you have any thoughts on the game's sound design or anything related to that?
The I mean, when you say sound and Metal Gear, the first thing that pops up is the exclamation point above people's head.
Right. So,
"Wah!"
like, yep,
Every time you get caught.
yep, yep. Even in like the Super Smash Brothers trailer that was shown like at the end, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
But my thoughts on the music is that I thought it was really appropriate. It was very energetic. It was like ominous and dark and appropriate with like the themes that were attached to it. And I never found it like bothersome. I don't think it was like annoying at any point or inappropriate. It just fit into everything so perfectly. And so
Mhm.
while it's not like memorable, it's not something that you're going to be humming around in the car with at like a red light or whatever. It was very perfect for setting the tone and the atmosphere of just the entire game or like any particular scene. So
I
yeah.
will say that for me, there is a song that gets stuck in my head, and it might happen to you without you even realizing it, but the sound, the music that plays during an alert when
Oh,
everyone's
true.
it's like bum, bum
Yep.
ba or whatever. But like if I'm in a hurry or getting ready, like and I'm like in a rush, that's in my head as I'm going by. It's like this frantic, like I've got to do something real quick and figure something out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it definitely gets the message across that, hey, you are in a dire situation right now. You got to figure something out. I don't know what it is, but just do it. Yeah, it definitely gets the message across. But one last thing that I wanted to mention for the sound design is that the voice acting was phenomenal in this
Oh
game,
yes.
and there is so much of it. Maybe that's why this game spanned across 2 discs. But like we mentioned before, there's so much dialogue, and in my opinion, it was so extremely well done and well acted. And even at times, if it wasn't, I don't care. I kind of like that. It adds like charm to the game. But overall, I thought it was phenomenal for a video game. I thought it did such a great job.
Every cut scene is voiced, obviously. But then there's so much, like we talked about, and unnecessary is the wrong word, but superfluous maybe. Just
Right.
so much dialogue and it's all voiced. And you can even, I mean, you've got the option to, I think it's the B button, you can press to cut the audio off and just read it yourself
Yeah.
at your own pace. But it's scripted and it just keeps going and going and going. And you can spend, I mean, a lot of this game is maybe like 8 to 10 hours ish.
Yeah.
And half of that is cutscenes and dialogue.
hmm Yeah, it's such
There's
a
so much of it.
important. Yeah, it's different from a lot of other games because it's a little less interactive because of that. Because the story is such a major focus, and
I will say they made, uh, and this is not a big deal at all, but I notice it every time I turn it on because I've played the original Metal Gear Solid. Um, you hear like when you turn on the Game Boy, you expect the ba-da, that little sound.
yep.
And when you turn on the GameCube, you hear the GameCube startup music. Same thing when you turn on a 3DS, you hear the startup music. And you start to identify like this is what I hear every time I start this game. When you start the original Metal Gear Solid, there's this really short burst of recording of a like a female singer going ba 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 ba, and that's not in this. And it bums me out every time I turn on Twin Snakes. Right at the beginning, it's when the Konami logo comes up. I'm expecting to hear ba 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 ba,
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
and
I'd
they
never
cut
heard
that out.
that.
I don't know why that choice was made, but every time I turn it on and I'm like leaning forward, like I'm gonna hear it, and then it's not
Right.
there.
Oh, yeah, that would drive me nuts. But yeah, I mean, just my overall thoughts on the sound design and music and stuff. Music's great, voice
That's
acting is
fantastic.
great, super high production value in that category in particular. Um, let's move on to the graphics of the game. Um, my thoughts on the graphics is that it kind of tries to go for like this realistic-ish look, but it's also kind of like daydreamy and cartoonish in a way. So it is trying to make it feel as though it's happening in the real world, but the GameCube obviously had its limitations, and so they
Yeah.
kind of had this unique, I don't want to say art style, but conceptual art of the game where the characters are they kind of look like mannequins, which kind of like drove me a little insane. They just have these weird faces, but I also kind of like that. For some reason, it just works for me. Um, there's something charming about it, but the levels themselves, there's a lot of like gray and black and some green and brown, so it's not the most like vibrant, but I don't know, the game's just so compelling that you don't really pay attention that there's not too much variety to the aesthetics, I guess. But yeah, I think it's just kind of like watercolory in a way. It's like realistic, but daydreamy and watercolory in a way, I guess, to kind of give it this artistic feel with this system that is a little bit limited, and because they know it won't look perfectly realistic, which the later ones would try to kind of try to go for. So, what do you think about
Yeah.
the graphics?
They definitely, playing Metal Gear Solid 2, they brought over the same, I don't know if it's the same engine or not, but it looks visually very similar to Metal Gear Solid 2. And it's a huge improvement in just the visuals of the PS1 game, as any remake of a PS1 game would be at any point ever. It's going to look
Right.
better than the PS1 game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree though. It's hard being on the GameCube, and just at that time making things look ultra realistic is tough. And
Right.
going back watching it with that frame of mind, thinking this is going to look like a real person in a real environment, it doesn't meet that expectation. But you can definitely get a sense. I mean, like you said, there is a style to it. You can tell that they were going for an approach at the time. Now, does that hold up or not? I don't know, but the gameplay is good enough that it it
Yeah.
makes up for it.
Right. It wasn't really something that I was conscious of while playing it. It was kind of just something I was thinking of for the sake of this episode, just kind of like reflecting on the look. And that's kind of what I took away from it. But it doesn't sound like I'm giving it the most sparkling review or impression of it, but like it's perfectly serviceable and works for the game. And also, it's important to keep in mind that this game was intended for standard definition TV. So it's very
Oh yeah.
possible that it looks much better on a TV like that. I am very fortunate that I have one of those like GameCube upresers
Me too.
that
Yeah.
it's like those plug-in things and makes a huge difference. So while it's a lot more crisp, which is great, takes advantage of my HD TV, I don't really know if that's a true reflection of like what their vision was at that time, like what they intended the game to really look like on a standard TV. But the textures are a little bit muddy. That's something that's kind
Sure.
of just inevitable. So yeah, muddy textures, which is not a big deal. But one thing that I do really like is the camera angles of the game. It has like a whole variety of camera angles, and usually they're perfectly fine. But something that they introduced into the game was the first-person perspective from Metal Gear Solid 2. And some people complain about that, say that it's game breaking. I think it's fine. I thought that it added an interesting new element into the game, and I like looking around in my games. So that's just it was a nice addition, at least for me. So yeah,
It definitely, that first person perspective makes the world feel more alive.
right,
Because coming from that, the generally the gameplay is this top down overhead perspective, and it shifts. You're right, it does shift depending on what room you're in. It kind of has a cinematic flair, even just walking around. The
yes,
camera will like pan and follow you through certain areas. Um, but also the funny thing about this, the graphics is a number of the characters that you get to know throughout the game don't even have 3D models. It's just
um,
that codec conversation, like
right,
for the Colonel that you talk to, and Mei Ling that saves your game. A lot of those people that you talk to on the radio don't even have. It's just the 2D image that you see
right.
in that dialogue.
And you don't really mind, and you look at that codec a lot throughout this game, but you don't
Mhm.
really mind how primitive it looks, kind of because it's a legacy thing and an iconic element of the Metal Gear Solid franchise, but also it's very simple. It's like these kind of like anime styled characters with like a green layover, if that's the right word. I don't know.
Mhm.
And it kind of has like these like radio signals to make it look like or give this feel of like a radio signal or whatever. But you don't really pay attention to the look of it because you're so engaged with what they're saying, because again the voice acting is phenomenal, and the story and the character development that's unfolding in those conversations is so engaging and compelling and interesting that you're only focused on that. You don't really care about the graphics so much. So
Yeah.
yeah, the graphics are not, they're not the most impressive part of the game, but it doesn't matter because everything else is just incredible.
It is a you should definitely look up maybe some comparison shots though to the original Metal Gear. It's astounding how different this game looks
Mhm.
visually.
Yeah.
Like, like in Metal Gear Solid for the PS1, they don't have facial features. It's just kind of a faded area for eyes and a painted on mouth.
Right.
just a
Like
block head.
blocky. Yeah, exactly. I do remember seeing comparison images when the game started to come out. I was just like, oh yeah, I'll stick with this version. Not that I could play the other one, but um was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Not about the sound. It's excellent all throughout,
Okay. Hmm.
honestly.
All right. So I wanted to kind of talk about just like miscellaneous favorite things or little details that we noticed throughout our experience with the game that just make the experience so interesting. So um, I thought that the briefing mode, the one that you kind of mentioned to me when we were talking before, was really interesting. They do give you some background on previous games, which I appreciate because they add some context on what's happened before the game. And there's this weird mode where like they have these fake videotapes of the commander talking to Solid Snake, and you can move the camera around, which is weird because it's like it's a recording, so why are you able to interact in that way? But the conversations were really interesting there. Um, I think it's important to note that this game has a sense of humor to it. Yes,
Oh
it's
yes.
it's very dark overall, but I don't want to say don't take it too seriously because they do, but they they do sprinkle in little jokey things, kind of like the book that I mentioned before, and hiding under a box because it looks very silly, and these silly items that you get too. So um, yeah, and also something I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure if you noticed this, but with the when after like the president dies, they kind of talk about the chips that you have like in your body or you're carrying or something like that. And this is before Bluetooth was invented and NFC chips. So they tried to imagine this future where we have these chips that like interact with things around us. But their explanation was that these chips interact with our body's electrical field and the salts of our bodies,
Yeah.
which is pretty interesting. Because I'm sure that's a technology that could exist, but luckily that's not really what Bluetooth runs on. So I thought that was
Body
pretty
salt
cool.
propelled.
Yeah. And I also thought that the mission logs were really considerate. Like when you save
Oh
the
yeah.
game and you turn the game off, you turn it back on a few days later, they give you this little reminder and summary of what has happened up to this point. And it's very short, but it's right to the point. And after you read them, you're just like, oh, yeah, I totally forgot about that. Okay, this is where I'm at. So let's keep going. So I thought that was a really clever and helpful implementation.
Yeah, that's something that I really appreciate about this game. There are a lot of games that if I play for a little while and for whatever reason I stop playing for a day or a week or even a month or however long, but coming back to it, sometimes I have to start the game over because I don't know where I am. But you jump into this and it's like a couple paragraphs of here's exactly what you've been doing and what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly. Yeah. And just two quick, maybe paragraphs. It depends on like
Yeah.
how much you've done up to that point. But yeah, right to the point, super helpful. You get an idea of what just happened and what you got to do, and it's perfect. I love that. And more games should be doing that by this point, and they haven't really done that. Um, but yeah, there's lots of fun little secrets in the game and different ways to approach scenes. We've mentioned that a few times, but there's lots of options and things that you may not ever encounter. So the replayability of the game, like, yeah, it's very short, but it does kind of incentivize you to go back because there's lots of things that you will miss inevitably. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
A fun thing to do in this game is, and there's no way I could make it through it, but to play it on extreme, which is every
Oh
time you
God.
get spotted, you get a game over.
Uh, nah, I'm good with that. Although that does sound like a pretty fun challenge if
Well,
I
after I finished it, see, I've played it a few different times now, but the last time I played it, I put it on very easy, just so I could get through the story and get through the
yes.
game. But right afterwards, I started it over again on extreme, and it is tough. It is
Right.
so tough. It After several tries, I was able to make it through the first area, and that's it.
Right.
Like, just to get to the snow hangar, just to get through that first little area, but that's a tough experience for sure.
Yeah, because like we mentioned, the AI in this game is very intelligent, so it's an interesting challenge to kind of sneak through without ever being noticed the entire game. That is a daunting task, but
Mhm.
pretty fun. I just wish that the controls kind of lent themselves a little bit better to that type of challenge, because I feel like it wouldn't just be the challenge of not being seen, but the challenge of overcoming some of the minor quirks in the controls too.
Well, they made definitely, over time as they made more Metal Gear Solid games, um, improved the controls to the point that the most recent release, well, almost most recent, but Metal Gear Solid 5, um, they refined the controls so much by that point. It's a night and day comparison.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that it's gotten a lot more refined ever since, which is good to know that it hasn't gotten like too archaic. Resident Evil for a while used the same like tank controls, and then they just recently started to make them a little bit better, from what I hear. But yeah, one last thing on that is I found it to be a lot more difficult than I expected. I played the game this time. I don't know how I played the first time I played it and beat it, but this time I played on easy and I was still struggling. I still am struggling. With one of the boss fights, Vulcan Raven, that's a tough boss fight even on easy mode. So it's just something to expect. It's not like, I don't want to say it's unfair, although maybe at times it can be, but like it's still a fun challenge, and you do kind of begin to understand how you can overcome the challenge, but it can be tough.
I would say personally, of all the boss fights, that one is the weakest, in my opinion, at least. Because yeah, you're right. The mechanics of the game don't service that boss fight as well as it could.
Right.
So that's for me, that one's at the low end of all the fights.
Right. And it's not because it's a bad boss fight, it's just that the controls are just a little annoying in the heat of the moment sometimes. Because I think it's a great boss fight. I think it's very interesting how you approach it, but it's still doable. Just something to consider. And so the kind of like one of the last things, I guess the second to last thing I want to talk about is like our final impressions of the game, like how we remember it moving forward. So, um, in my opinion, the game takes itself very seriously, like I said, but the sense of humor that it adds in between and these extra details that they add make it into an experience that is unlike anything else I've ever played, even to this day. There's just so much production value in this game, and I wish it sold even better than it did, and is on the minds of people more than it is because of that level of detail. Because I would love for more of that. I feel like games, they have a lot of detail in things that don't really matter and aren't really that interesting, but I want them to start focusing on relationships and options in games and funny little details and stuff like that. um, but yeah, I loved this game. I love it. I love talking about it with you and reminiscing of it. Just so nostalgic for my experience with it. Something that I did notice when I was playing the game is that I'm very impatient, so it was hard to go back and like wait sometimes. So it is not a game for the impatient, but it is definitely worth committing to. It's worth the investment of time, and it's not very long, which is great. But yeah, I love this game very thoroughly. So, what are your final impressions of the game?
it's it's impossible for me to look at this game without connecting it to the rest of the series.
Yes.
And that's for me, that is what stands out to me the most is how well this game, it had the benefit of hindsight, uh, being that it came out after Metal Gear Solid 2. And so even in the final moments of the game, after the credits are over, there's a little tag that loops it back in and connects it to the events of Metal Gear Solid 2. Um, but when you play the rest of the series all the way up like to the end of the timeline, quote unquote, of Metal Gear Solid 4, and then going back to the beginning at Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. It This game is right in the middle of all that timeline wise, and it's fascinating playing this, knowing the history and the future of that storyline and how this is integral to that continuity. And I love, zooming out and viewing it in the context of that. And I would absolutely, it's fun to go back and play the original Metal Gear Solid. Um, but as far as, you know, which one is quote unquote canon, fans would disagree, but this is the one that I would suggest if you're going to play through the series, play this one when you get to that point.
Yeah, it's it lends itself to a variety of players as long as you know what to expect. Yeah, I do think it's good for beginners if you know what to expect, but it is very cool that you have that perspective with the entire series, because that, I'm sure, lends itself to a unique experience in it on its own. But for me, who has only played this version, or I'm sorry, this particular title in the Metal Gear series, this is the only game that I've played. I love it. Even without really knowing all the other things in the other games, I still think it's worth playing. And me not playing the other ones hasn't affected my enjoyment whatsoever. It's just that I have this one singular experience, and it's kind of like a standalone thing in my
Oh,
mind, which is completely
absolutely.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, the story is very self-contained. I love that it's, yeah, you don't have to have any prior knowledge, and it gives you enough knowledge, enough information within the game
Right.
itself to be able to understand the context of what you're doing and what you're playing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. So yeah, it is self-contained and it is enjoyable in that way, but it also happens to tie into this other series, and you begin to appreciate all the little nuances and complexities in the story, and it just adds this more rewarding experience if you are able to experience the other games. Um, so the last thing I want to talk about is the legacy of this game and how it stands on its own, looking back. But when the game came out, it did get a lot of positive reviews, which is great. And that was one of the reasons why I picked it up. But I've noticed that there's a lot of like nitpicking criticisms of it, and one of them was that the first person mode kind of like was game breaking. I had no experience with that at all. I thought it was perfectly fine, and I thought that it added to the game, but that's just me.
Well, I think, where you could see what people are talking about is when you try to play the game without using first person.
Mm,
And
right.
that's what they're accustomed to with, with the original versus the remake. Like, for example, that the fight with Revolver Ocelot, you can't see where he is in the original game.
Yep.
You've got to, see where the gunshots are coming from and aim in that direction. But in first person mode, you just look at him and shoot him.
Right. But I think it's like it offers a different experience, not really like
It
a
does. Yeah.
worse experience, because I actually kind of would prefer that. I don't really want to do the thing that you're describing that the original
Right.
has. I
Right.
actually thought this was pretty cool because you go from a third person perspective to a first person perspective, and you have to like line up your shot, which you don't really do too often in this game. So I thought it offered a little bit of variety, so I kind of like it.
Hmm.
But I can totally understand people or purists not really enjoying that, which is perfectly valid. But for a lot of people, especially strictly Nintendo fans, this is going to be their really only experience with the series, and they're not going to really notice that. So I think it's perfectly fine. Um, but this is one of just a few games in this series that are on Nintendo platforms. So there's this on the GameCube. There's Metal Gear Solid 3D, which is a 3D, like
Yeah.
stereoscopic 3D version of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, or I think even Subsistence, for PlayStation 2, which I've heard very good things. And Warren actually persuaded me to buy it, and I actually have it in my collection at the moment, which is very cool, and I'm excited to get to that. And
Hopefully we
I
can talk
believe
about that
there's
one day.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're definitely going to make an episode on that. And there's a few others on like the original Nintendo and Game Boy. Can you talk about those, Warren?
Yeah, so the original Metal Gear was ported to the NES, and it had a few changes just coming from Japan, bringing it over to America. There's some issues with like the text for characters not being in the right place and some translation issues. But for the most part, it is the same game with a few things added or taken away here and there. So that yeah, you can play the original Metal Gear on the NES, and it was available on the Wii at the time when the Wii had a virtual console. But you know
Oh,
that's gone now.
wow.
Um,
I didn't know that.
yeah, and it got its own American only exclusive sequel called Snake's Revenge that is not considered canon, and Kojima himself disowned that game and didn't have any involvement with it.
Wow.
Um, but that's also on the NES. So there's Metal Gear and Snake's Revenge, which took it's mostly the similar kind of gameplay, but it added also like Zelda 2 did, added like a side-scrolling section where you could go back and forth and um, play that way.
Oh, cool.
Um, but then there's the fantastic and undermentioned Metal Gear Solid or Metal Gear Ghost Babel for the Game Boy Color, which was intended to, use the popularity of Metal Gear Solid. This was before Twin Snakes came out, but take the popularity of Metal Gear Solid and bring it to a portable form. So it's not like a lot of people think. It's not a handheld version of Metal Gear Solid or the Twin Snakes. It's its own story, and it assumes that you've played Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2. Solid Snake is the name of that one, but it assumes you've played those 2 games, and it's like an alternate reality or an alternate timeline instead of the Twin Snakes or Metal Gear Solid, that takes place, I guess, around the same time in 2005, but it's a completely different narrative. It is similar. It has, colorful, flavorful boss fights, but for a Game Boy Color game, it's really, really impressive.
Yeah.
I think it came out in 2000. But that AI that you talk about, um, it for the Game Boy Color, it's a very similar experience, and it's astounding what they were able to do with it. The animation is very fluid, and there's a lot of depth to the characters, and the story has the same codex style conversations, and it's very like anime influenced and stylized in its presentation. When you look up artwork for Metal Gear Solid or the Twin Snakes, you'll see a lot of anime looking like pencil designs or like airbrush designs, really stylized
Right.
things,
Yep.
and that whole game is sort of centered around that art style on the Game Boy
Yeah.
Color. So yeah,
Yeah.
those 5 games for a Nintendo consoles are what we've got.
Right. So I really do hope that we get the rest of the Metal Gear games on Nintendo platforms at some point. I know that 5 is probably impossible on the Switch at the moment, but I'm thinking it could happen on the Switch too um, if Konami is continuing this like newfound wave of bringing out content again. So we'll see what happens with that.
Well,
But
on the Switch Online, we've got the NES app with some games on there, and if I'm not mistaken, on that one and the Super Nintendo one, there are a couple Konami games, and
yes.
so it seems feasible to me that they would stick Metal Gear on there, but it hasn't happened.
Yeah, who knows with like licenses and fees and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but there's a potential. But something I thought that was really interesting for Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes is that I forget who said it. I think like maybe the original director or something said that there is quote a likelihood end quote that Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes will come to Switch at some point. And that was a relatively recent quote. So
Wow.
we'll see what happens with that. I was very surprised when I found that. Um, it
I would
isn't,
absolutely replay this again and buy it again.
yeah, because it's a perfect like Switch type game. Being portable and this grand console experience. I think it's the perfect title for something like that. But it is very likely that nothing will happen, because Konami is very weird and Metal Gear Solid
Yes.
as a whole is very strange. So who knows? But I, like the guy said, he said that there's a likelihood, which is so much better than nothing. So let's hope that he will follow through on that. Um, But yeah, the last thing I want to mention about the legacy of this game is that I think it opened the door, excuse me, kind of for Solid Snake to appear in Super Smash Brothers. He was the
Oh, sure.
very first third-party character out of all the third-party characters in the world. Solid Snake was the first one to appear in Super Smash Brothers and has opened the water gates, the floodgates, whatever the phrase is, for people wanting these iconic characters to appear in Super Smash Brothers, and has turned it into this like this museum in a way of iconic video game characters. So I just thought that was so weird that Solid Snake was the first third-party character to appear in such a beloved franchise.
I love that they did that one, but then the stage you play in,
Yes.
and it is that, opening area in the snow, and then the Metal Gear Rex peeks out occasionally, and you can use the codec and call,
Oh yeah.
uh, goodness, Roy Campbell from, they got the same voice actors to come in and record dialogue. You can call and ask about like who's this Mario character and get some background information, just like in Metal Gear Solid.
I
It's
love
great.
that. Yeah, I think Kojima actually insisted that they put him in Brawl, but also he wanted him to be in Melee. So there
Oh,
was a strong possibility at the time for Snake to be in Melee, but I guess it was too late in development that they just didn't have time to add him.
yeah, and
So
they
that's
didn't add any updates or anything like that back then.
right.
That would have tied in really well because I think Melee came out in like what, 2004 or 3, somewhere in there.
2001, right when
2001. Okay, yeah, you're right. But it would have been, on the same system. Well, that was before this. So yeah, I don't know. Never mind.
it could, well, I mean, Super Smash Brother kind of lends itself as kind of like a marketing campaign for
It does
future
now.
releases. So,
Yeah,
and it did that with Fire Emblem, and I don't know. I feel like there's other things too. Animal Crossing at the time, and
sure.
Custom Robo. So, it could have had people be more interested in Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't really know how well this game sold, but I do know that it's not talked about as often as it deserves to be. I
Hmm.
think that this game is such a work of art, and the way that it has a interesting and real perspective on issues that we are currently facing and will continue to face for the rest of our lives is so interesting. And I had such a great connection with this game, and I just loved the attention to detail and the enormity of the Metal Gear Solid Rex, and um, just the interesting boss fights that you have. It was coming from, I was a teenager, so it was a few years since my like Power Rangers phase had ended, but I still loved this idea of like characters having these special abilities, and um, yeah, just being like these kind of like superheroes in a way. So I love everything about this game. The more that I talk about it, the more that I play it, the more I love it. And it's so special, and I hope that more people get to experience it, and hopefully that can happen in the form of like a Switch release. So that's pretty much it for me. Anything that you wanted to add?
No, I'm happy to be able to talk about this finally with someone. And if any of you out there, have never gotten into the Metal Gear series or have heard about it, like absolutely give this game a try if you can find a copy of this. But it's an awesome point, like an entry point for the series. And if it's the only one in the series you ever play, even like it represents the series very well. And I would definitely encourage people to find and try to play this or any other game in the series if they can,
Yeah,
to jump
totally.
in.
Yeah, I didn't feel lost whatsoever when I played this game. Everything made perfect sense. So, it's I love this game, and it's such a GameCube classic. So if you're someone who is, fond of the GameCube and never really got around to this title, I honestly think that it's essential playing, at least if you're interested in this type of genre. So, yeah. Well, Warren, thank you so much for joining me. I had such a great time speaking with you tonight about this game that we both love, and even speaking to you before this, leading up to it. So you are such you are the perfect person to bring on this show. So thank you again so much. I definitely want to make sure that people are aware of your YouTube channel. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. If you want to check that out, it's youtube.com/c/G Akers. That's Akers. But you can just search for G Akers. Yeah, mostly I do song covers and my own arrangements of things. But I also have a few like geek and nerd related things, movies and shows. And I actually not too long ago put out a video just showing off the Metal Gear games on Nintendo platforms. So yeah, head over there and check it out.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I know you put a lot of work into your videos, so I hope more people get to check that out. But Warren, thank you again so much, and thank you to all of our listeners for listening to this episode. If you wanted to reach us or contact us or send us any kind of message about anything that you're playing, or have some comments on like an upcoming episode, you can reach out to us at you can see us on Facebook at Nintendo NOS, and we also have a pretty active Facebook group. I believe that's Nintendo Nostalgia Chats. I could be wrong about that, but you'll find it. On Twitter, you can find us at Nintendo_NOS. On Instagram, we're Nintendo NOSIN. And Josh actually just started a TikTok channel with us. I don't have that handle on me, but just search Nintendo Nostalgia. Hopefully it'll come up. And you can also send us emails at nintendonostalgiain@gmail.com. And we love getting voicemails from our listeners, so you can call us anytime at 317-969-5690. If you want to know about what episodes we have coming out, I don't really know at the top of my head, but we have a whole bunch planned, at least heading into the fall. So just check the Facebook group and Twitter to see if there's something that you might want to mention about the games that we'll be talking about. But yeah, thank you guys again, and we'll catch you all next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.